Okay, good morning everybody. Can everybody hear me and see me? I'm not that big, so if you have the idea in the back that you can't see me, please let me know, then I'll get on stage. But I thought the stage was a bit high, so I'm standing in front of it. Is that okay? Can you all see me? I guess you can all hear me, right? Probably. Okay. Okay, this is a talk about where I think the way we work in companies, the way we work in projects and teams is going to change. And a bit about how it will change, but most of all, why it will change. And it's a talk called "It's a Small World," after all. It's an interesting one. I used to have a picture of the Disney park on my slide deck. And then when I left my previous company, I play a lot of board games. And a former colleague of me gave me this particular board game. So I thought, well, nice gesture to put it on the slide, right? So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sander. Yeah, I'm an independent dad. I have 3 kids of my own. My girlfriend, who's coming in later, she's doing a talk in the last slot at the conference. Together we have 5 kids, so it's kind of complicated. So directing my own life, well, to a certain level, right? The rest is basically decided by the kids. Although they're becoming independent as well. And I do a bit of, well, agile coaching. I'm basically a developer. I've been writing code since I was 14. So that's like 102 years already. And yeah, I'm getting old actually. I'll show you how old I am actually later. And I'm currently the chief architect for a company called QB. You probably know them because they make Tone, which is the smart thermostat. They do a lot of things with a lot of data. So they get like 1 terabyte of data coming in from home. So they know a lot about energy and about waste. And they can predict how fast your boiler will break down, for instance, which is kind of nice if you're building society or a corporation. Besides that, I used to be the CTO for a couple of companies. I used to work for a small company called Capgemini. You might have heard of that. And I was one of their global agile thought leaders. This is my website, my Twitter tag, yada, 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 blah, 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 etc., etc. Good. That was the introduction. So, let me try to explain to you that the times are changing. Well, you of course know that. This is Bob Dylan. He wrote that, I think, in 1964, 96, just before I was born. And the thing is, yes, the times are changing. We all know that, right? We all realize that. But the times are changing faster and faster and faster. And this particular graph that I'll show you, well, basically displays it. This is Moore's Law. You all know Moore's Law, right? Moore's Law basically says that the number of transistors in a dense integrated circuit doubles approximately every 2 years. Now, you might look at this like it's a linear line. It isn't actually. It's going up exponentially, which means the possibilities we have, we as technologists, double approximately every 2 years. So the things we can do now, which are already huge, will double in 2 years. Now, if you take that back a bit, let's say you would order a laptop at bol.com or Amazon or wherever you might do that. In 1954, it will end up at your doorstep like this. This was the size of a regular computer in 1954, right? This was still big. When I came into the industry in the 80s, computers looked a bit like this. Have you ever seen one like these? That makes you old, people. This is an IBM 8180, or it's a 5150 actually. And I used to have a machine like this. This is the machine I first started, except for my Commodore 64, by the way. Who owns a Commodore 64? Mine still runs. I checked it last year. I lent it out to a friend. He played games on it for years. And I got it back. It still works, right? This machine is 40 years old. It's kind of cute. So for those of you, the younger people in the room, these vertical slots in the machine, or horizontal slots in the machine actually, I checked. I did a guest lecture at a university recently, and these guys were like, oh, what are they for? Is it to charge your mobile phone or whatever? I said, no. This is a floppy drive. And I said, a what? Well, stuff like that. That makes you old, right? So computers got bigger, smaller and smaller, and the things we could do with it grew and grew and grew. And then in 2006, this small company called Amazon, they thought, you know what we'll do? We have a whole bunch of computers that we can rent out to other people, which means that other people who don't have the money to buy all these big machines and do big stuff with it can now do different stuff, right? Before that, if you were a bank, who of you works for a bank, by the way? Anybody who works for a bank? You work for a bank? Oh, cool. Probably because you're wearing an orange suit now. And so if you were a bank, you used to have a lot of iron in the basement, loads of it, mainframes, AS400s, whatever you might have, right? And you needed people to maintain that, hundreds of people, which is not your core business, right? Since everything moved to the cloud, since 2006, of course, after Amazon, Microsoft came into the game, and Google came into the game, and IBM, okay, for the younger people, that used to be an important company. And then Oracle came in, that also used to be an important company at one point in time, I think, probably, who knows. Anyway, so they all came in, and everything moved to the cloud. And we are slowly moving more and more into the cloud. Companies these days don't own hardware. One of my previous clients is a company that wants to be the Netflix of sport, right? They stream video. They want to grow to 100 million subscribers in the next 3 years. They don't own any hardware at all, right? Now this is going to change stuff. So a bit about disruption. I'll show you some examples, right? So this interesting graph is the fintech landscape in the Netherlands in 2018. There are 430 companies in this slide. 430. Just imagine, if only one of these would be able to build banking software, right? You think you can? The company my girlfriend works at, they host online banks, right? And one of the developers on her team is building banking software on his own in the cloud. He spent about a year on it, and it's almost done. He could apply for a license and become his own bank, right? Can you do that? Yes, you can, right? There's banks out there that don't own any hardware, right? Like there's Monzo in the UK. Monzo is an online bank. They don't have offices, they don't have 10,000s of people, and they are competing with the traditional brick and mortar banks. Or N26 in Germany. And it gets even worse, because if you can believe the CEO of the ING, he basically says, well, those small companies are not our big competitors. Our big competitors will be the likes of Amazon and Google and Facebook and Apple, if they still exist in 5 years. Those will be companies that we have to compete with, because they will do payments as well, right? Amazon does probably more payments these days than a normal bank does. So they could come into the market as well. Will they? I don't know. Who wants to be a bank anyway? It's, well, I don't like it. But anyway, so I'm not a bank fan, but other companies from outside of the industry, not even from fintech or from banking, are also going into payments. Like if you're an airline company like AirAsia, they're figured out, like, you know, we do tons of payments. We sell tickets, we sell coffee on board of our airplanes, which I really, really hate, because I want to get free coffee on my airplanes. And they said, well, we can do payments as well. Why not? We have a payment system. Let's become a bank. So the basic point of this is that given the fact that the possibilities grow every 2 years, they double in size, the things we can do as technologists, that allows us in tech to change the world, right? It's not the politicians, it's not the big companies, it's us. We do that, actually. The things we come up with, the things we innovate, change the world, basically. And if you want to compete in this new world, because competition can come from any angle, from any country, from any company with any size. How do you compete with that? Well, to do that, you have to move in what I call the world of small moving parts. So what's the world of small moving parts? Well, basically there's 4 things on the slide. First of all, I think that in this industry of software development, we should stop doing projects, right? Who of you is in a project? Most of you probably. None of you, because nobody dares to admit, right? I know. Don't worry, I'm not going to punch on you or whatever. So instead of doing projects, as we've done for years in this industry, and they have usually failed, like for instance, there was a government project that recently failed, I'm not going to name it, but the original planning for the project was, it would cost 7 million and it would be done in 2 years' time. When they stopped it, being unsuccessful, after I think a decade, it had cost 220 million euros, right? And it didn't deliver a zip. That's terrible, right? We should get out of these projects. We should move to building products. And we should do that feature by feature and deliver each of these features into production. We should also do that in even shorter cycles. Who of you is in an agile project? Oh, now people, yeah. If you're not, where are you in? Are you doing waterfall or are you beyond that, what I would call it? The thing I would debate is that those 2-week cycles that we are used to in agile projects, they will shorten. The whole idea of having sprints will go away, right? Most of the stuff we are doing now will evolve. The way we work will evolve in the next couple of years, as it has always done. If you're old like me, you've been in waterfall projects, and you came through stuff like rational unified process and all these becoming shorter iterative approaches, and then you moved into agile like 20 years ago, and now it's time to move on again. Because we have to. Otherwise, we won't be able to compete with anybody else who comes into our industry. Also, if we do that, my opinion is that how teams are set up in the agile era, like we usually have 6 plus or minus 3 teams, right? It's basically what the Scrum Guide more or less says. That will change too, because there's lots of drawbacks in that as well. Doesn't mean it's wrong, it means we will evolve from that. And in the 4th place, we have to talk about smaller components. Now, the problem with this talk is that I usually take too long in the first 3, and then I always skip the 4th one. But I have like 5 minutes extra today, so I might get to I might get to the last part. I hope so. Anyway, let's start with the first one. So, a working product. Who of you have seen this model? It's called the Cynefin framework. It's written down by a guy from Wales. He's a professor, Dave Snowden, at Bangor University, and he wrote it while he was working for IBM. You know, the company that was big, but anyway. So, he says basically, there's actually 5 contexts in the world, right? You could start with the obvious context. If you are in an obvious context, that means if you have a problem, there is a single best practice to solve it, right? The only thing you have to do is, okay, this is the problem, this is the best practice, you can go there. It's linear, right? These are the simple ones to solve. You can even solve this in a waterfall project if you want to, as long as it's short. Like 2 weeks. And then you get to the complicated context. In the complicated context, if you have a problem, there is a whole bunch of possible solutions. Now that means you have to figure out which one of these solutions you should take, right? If you're going for a new identity provider, there's tons of, you can do third party, you can go to Azure AD, you can go to Amazon, you probably can go to IBM, Oracle, or wherever you go. You can build it yourself even. So there's lots of options, and you have to figure that out. So you have to do rigorous analysis to figure out what to do. And then you can build it, and then you can deliver it, right? Still pretty much linear. But the problem is, because technology changes so fast, because the world changes so fast, and the possibilities we have change so fast, and the minds of our users change so fast, and they have new requirements coming up every day, we have never been in this context. Right? So the whole idea of being able to do projects in a complicated context, it doesn't exist. Because most of us are in the complex context. That is, I hope you are in a complex context. Because in a complex context, the idea is that you can set the dotted horizon. You can figure out where you want to be as a team, as a company, as a product line, or a value stream, or whatever you might be in. You can set the dotted horizon. Where do we want to be in 3 years' time? And then you can start to focus towards that particular goal or mission or purpose, whatever you might have, right? So everything you do should be aligned to reach that goal. But since everything changes so fast, the only thing you can do is take the next step. You can do an experiment, you can probe. Try something out. If it works, continue in the same direction. If it doesn't work, change direction. And you can do that all the time. You need to do that all the time, because that's the only thing you have. There's no way on earth that in software development, in the tech industry, we can actually say, we need to go there, we need to be there in 3 years' time. Let's create a plan that we can exactly go there. Nobody knows how to do that. And we will never be able to do that anymore. So most of us will be in the complex context. And you have to behave like you're in the complex context. It could be worse, by the way. You could be in the chaotic context. In the chaotic context, you have no clue where you want to be. I worked for a company, and when you asked the CEO what he wanted, where he wanted to be in 3 years' time, his answer was, I want to have success. And then we asked him, this happened literally, right, on a management day, somewhere in a hotel, and then we said, so what do you mean by success? He said, well, I don't know, I just want to have success. So what do you want? Do you want to earn a lot of money? No, I'm not interested. I just want to have success. So define success, please. He couldn't. The whole company was running around in circles because they had no direction. So if you are in a chaotic context, that means you should figure out where you want to be. If you work in a company that is in a chaotic context and doesn't know where it wants to go and can't figure it out, leave. There's lots of jobs out there, right? Go work somewhere else. So the problem is, most of us are in a complex context and we have to behave like that. That means traditional projects, like with the iron triangle, and you set the time and the cost and the scope and the features and the resources, usually the main people, right? It goes out of the door. It doesn't work. If you have projects with detailed plannings, stop doing that, because it doesn't work. The only thing you can do is work from a roadmap. This is where we want to go. You set out the things you can do now that are of the utmost importance, that have the highest urgency. Do those first, and then evolve from that. That's the only thing you have to do. And one of the messages in this talk is, stop doing projects, because it doesn't really work. But none of you were in a project, so you're okay, right? Okay, what about cycles then? Now, I think we will move to even shorter cycles. Who of you is in a 2-week sprint? Probably almost everybody, right? So let me tell you a little bit about where we went with Agile, and specifically with Scrum. So is anybody of you doing any martial arts, like karate or jiu-jitsu or whatever? Anybody? You do? You did it. So how long does it take you to become, let's say, a karate master?
I didn't get that far.
Oh, I know somebody who got that far. She'll be here in the end of the afternoon. She's a former Dutch champion of karate, and asked her, and she said, well, it takes about 10 years of rigorous training before you actually reach a level that you might say, oh, I'm fairly good at this. Now, let's say you want to do the same in Scrum. You want to become a master in Scrum. How long does that take? 2 days, dudes. You take a training course, you do the exam, and you're a Scrum Master, right? That means you can solve all the problems in the Agile world, right? No, you can't. So what happened over the years? So I started doing Agile in the mid-90s somewhere, when it wasn't called Agile, actually, but we did very short iterative projects. And since then, lots of people came into the industry with little to no experience and little to no knowledge, except that they had this little paper that says, yeah, I'm a Scrum Master, or whatever, right? I'm not bashing on Scrum, it's just the way it happens. And when you do that, people will try to apply this very dogmatically, right? They will say, well, let me read to you what a dogma is, right? It's the established belief or doctrine, let's say Agile, held by a particular group or organization, or held by a religion, sorry, so scrum.org, probably, or a particular group or organization. It's authoritative and not to be disputed, doubted, or diverged from by the practitioners or believers. That means that lots of people will apply these Agile approaches, and specifically Scrum, because it is the most popular framework, in a very dogmatic way, in a very mechanical way. They're like, yes, we do stand-up meetings, or daily Scrums, or whatever you call them, so we're Agile. No, you're not. We have a board on the wall, we have post-its, so we're Agile. No, you're not. We drew two weekly retrospectives. That means we're Agile. Well, it helps. Doesn't mean you're Agile, right? Applying the mechanics does not mean you do Agile. Now, if you look at the arbitrary sprint or iteration or whatever you might call it, this is an example from a project in Belgium, actually. It was done for an atomic agency. That was the client, actually. Now, if you look at this particular graph, so what happened here is that, so they started estimating all the work, right? So this is the amount of work they had for this particular month, and then this is, well, looks like I'm drunk already, but this is the ideal line. And at the end of the sprint, they had some work left. And you might say, yeah, happens to us all the time, right? Have you ever had this? Say yes. I've had this, for sure. But they had it every sprint. So sprint 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And after half a year, the project manager came to me. He said, I wasn't in the project, right? I was doing what is called at Capgemini a flying squad. You fly into a project that's in trouble, you give them some advice, and you fly out again before they can actually apply the things you want to change. So basically, they had work left after every sprint. And then the project manager did the math. He said, well, we have still 3 sprints left before we have to deliver. And that means we have to do 3 times the work we do now in the next 3 sprints. And the team was like, what? We cannot do that. We cannot go faster because you just say we have to go faster. It doesn't work. So he fired all of them. And then he hired 300 developers from India. This is a true story. About 300, but there were quite a few of them. That didn't change much, actually. So the whole thing is, this sprints is just an arbitrary artifact that you can apply to your project, but you don't have to. If you look at what the Agile Manifesto says, it doesn't say deliver stuff in every 2 weeks. It says deliver stuff continuously. And to do stuff continuously, you might as well stop doing sprints. They're not a requirement to being agile. They're a technique to help you. But once you've done that for a while, you will see that you can move on from that. And you can move on to that in something much more continuous. This slide, by the way, does not mean that you have to apply Jira to be agile. A lot of managers still seem to believe that. But it means move stuff from left to right. That's all you need to do, right? Stuff comes into your backlog, and you do the work, and it goes out on the other end. There's no planning whatsoever. It's just pick up the next item, work on it, done, next item. That is actually the whole process I think you need. And yes, for those of you who noticed, this does look a bit like Kanban. As I said, we play board games. There is actually a Kanban board game. I won't show you the text on the other side of the box because it's horrible. Anyway, so we figured it out. So to be continuous, to become continuous, you need to automate stuff. You need to automate everything. This is a Jenkins pipeline. Again, it doesn't mean you have to use Jenkins. It's a good tool, but anyway, you have to automate your whole process. Everything that you test needs to be automated, right? Like, for instance, this particular component, it had like 3K lines of code. I wrote most of them, actually. It has a 97.2% code coverage. That's pretty high. But it works, right? That means if we add a small feature to this particular component, and it goes through the pipeline, it's still tested because this is SonarQube, by the way, it's in the pipeline. You need to automate all of that, right? And it doesn't mean only automate your tests, it means automate your pipelines. It means automate your build process. Automate even the fact that you build a new pipeline if you have a new component. We got to a point at my previous client where we actually, if we created a new repo, in Bitbucket actually, then the whole thing would fire up. It would automatically create a pipeline. It would automatically create a location on Docker Hub to place the Docker image. Everything was done, right? We could just start programming, done. That level of automation you need to become continuous. That changes a lot. By the way, if you do that, you can actually build feature by feature. And if you build feature by feature, you can stop do projects, because they're horrible. Anyway, let's move on to the major part of this talk. It's about teams. Now, here's the thing. We've been doing Agile now for about 2 decades, more or less, right? If you're old like me, you could have done it by 2 decades. The thing is, since then, society changed. By the way, I love the Agile Manifesto, right? I wish I would have been there when they drew it up. I wasn't. I was doing Agile by the time, but I was just one level too far out of the circle that came into there. But the thing is, society and the world have changed over the past 2 decades. Again, we're working with this Agile Manifesto that is almost 2 decades old, which is good, but there's lots of things that we have now that it doesn't solve. I'll show you a few of these problems. The first one is autonomy and self-organization. This is my 19-year-old son, Spike. And he's a very nice guy. For me as a parent, I have 3 kids, right? It's very hard to decide for each of these kids, they're 23, 19, and 14, what the right level of autonomy is for each 3 of them. It's different per kid. This kid, for instance, he came out of high school, he did VWO, succeeded, good grades, and then he said, Dad, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I want to study. And so he took a leap year, and he wanted to go to Indonesia to take care of Komodo dragons. Could be a dream, right? And apparently he started drumming. And then, last September, he started at the university in Amsterdam in a study called Economy, Politics, and Philosophy. Nice study. although it had economy in it. And after a month, he came to me and he said, Dad, I'm going to quit. I'm like, what? You just started, dude. What are you going to do? He said, I want to become a professional drummer. He's 19, right? He has like 3 years of experience on the drums. Apparently, he's quite good. And he said, I'm going to devote the next year to becoming a professional drummer and get accepted to a conservatory. And I said, wow, it's your path, it's your life, it's your choice. I'm not going to interfere. I'm just going to facilitate it for you. And that is about autonomy, right? It's for everybody to be able to make the decisions and lead the life they want to live. So it's his choice. But the problem with autonomy is, and self-organization, is that for most people, it's out of their comfort zone. If I tell teams I work with, you are now autonomous, you can organize yourself. You know what the first question is they ask me?
How should I do that?
What?
How should I do that?
Right. They will ask the question, okay, so how do we do that? And what do you want us to do? Well, yeah, figure it out yourself, dudes. It's your life. They're not my kids usually, right? But the problem is, I cannot tell them how to be autonomous because it differs from people, from different teams to other teams. It's like saying, okay, we have to draw an owl, and I can tell you how to draw the first 2 circles. And after that, you run your own. And then some companies end up like this. This seems to be the image people have of what it means to be autonomous. It isn't, right? Would you want to work at a place like this? This is at Zappos, by the way. You know what happens if you decorate a place like this? People will start wearing noise-canceling headphones. They're quite good, actually. I have a pair, and they work really well. But communication goes out of the door, right? But the thing is, we're overdoing this. This is a nice picture. My girlfriend took this picture. She was in a job interview at a well-known retailer. They do cool things. It's in Rotterdam. Anyway, so this is one of their meeting rooms. It's a glass room, and it's filled up with little balls up to here, right? So if you come here for a very serious interview for a high IT position, and you sit in a room filled with balls, I'm like, what is the point of this? This has nothing to do with self-organization or autonomy. This is overdoing it. It's what I call mandatory fun. But what I did learn is this. Giving people fewer rules does change a bit. What it does, if you have fewer rules, that means you have to do more thinking of your own. Right? It means you cannot have other people do the thinking for you and you just execute it. Let me give you an example for that. This is a city in Indonesia. It's called Medan. It's on Sumatra. I was in Indonesia last year to do a conference, and I took some days off to go into the jungle. So I spent 3 days in the jungle, pretty cool actually. And to get there, I had to pass through this big city. It's like 2.3 million inhabitants, something like that. And this is on the roadside. This is basically the main road in the city. You see all the traffic lights and the signs and the lines on the road and stuff, and it's everywhere, right? It's directions everywhere. There isn't a single sign in the whole city, and this is a big city, right? And we needed to cross. So I'm in this taxi. Look, the traffic light. It's both red and green. I have no idea what that means. Still, we get to the other side pretty much safe, right? And it's not like that everybody gets killed all the time. If we, as Dutch or European or Western people, would drive in this city, we would probably kill ourselves. You know why? Because we are used to drive in over-regulated environments, like here in the Netherlands, right? Any road here in the Netherlands has tons of traffic signs, right? This is the crossroads near where I live, about 10 kilometers that way. It has traffic signs, it has lines, it has shark teeth. I don't know what it's called in English. Sorry for the non-Dutch speakers. And it's everything. And what happens is, people don't think anymore. And if you don't think anymore, everything becomes automatic. You know, it's even worse. So it's easier in the Netherlands to drive through a red light than it is driving through a green light. Because if you drive through a red light, you make sure you pay attention. So less rules means people will start thinking. They will communicate because you have to. So giving teams less rules gives them more autonomy, gives them more creativity. And that's exactly what you need. to change and to disrupt, right? So the next problem we have, it's called traffic jams. This is a picture I took on the A2 from Utrecht to Amsterdam a couple of weeks ago. And I was looking outside of my window, looking to the other side of the road where people were driving from Amsterdam to Utrecht. They were also standing still. And I was like, what's the point of this? Why does everybody want to be at work at 9 o'clock in the morning? So what do people do when they get to work at 9 o'clock in the morning? Usually their stand-ups don't start till 9:30, so it leaves you with half an hour of slack, right? So what do people do? Well, either they do slack or they start reading their emails. Couldn't you just read your fucking email at home before you get to work so I don't have to stand in traffic? If 20% of the people would do this, actually, read their email before they go to work, we would sort of dissolve most of the traffic jams we have in the country. So if you could allow for ways of working that allow you to come in later, because you only have to work with a small group of people, it would literally improve this without any additional effort. That's my dream, right? So anyway, so the next thing is, it's the programmer's mind. It is, as a programmer, it's getting more complex to build code, right? I started out on a computer that had a black screen with green characters on it, and I could literally stamp out Turbo Pascal. And then I went through the Turbo Pascal compiler, and it was okay. I had an application that was running on my machine. Stuff changed a bit over time, right? And the problem is, well, and Dijkstra actually mentioned it quite nicely. He said, well, the programmer has to be able to think in terms of conceptual hierarchies that are much deeper than a single mind ever needed to do before. Now, the thing is, writing software has become too complicated for us to do on our own. That means you have to do it as a team. Also, our mind doesn't operate from 9 to 5 either. It's not like most managers think that you come into work, you switch on your mind, you do great stuff, and then you go to lunch, and then you have a whole afternoon of great stuff, then you go home and it's over. My mind doesn't work like that. Yours probably doesn't either, right? It's like, I'm in the shower in the morning, I'm like, oh, this is a great idea. I should put that in the deck. But I have to be in Marseille in about half an hour, so I might not do it in this time of the, oh, wait, I have another idea. Stuff like that. I wake up in the middle of the night solving programming problems because my mind works like that. And you have to facilitate that, right? That means working with even smaller teams could help, right? Because you're much more autonomous to do that. Also, in this industry, I'll show you a whole bunch of these problems, right? Also in this industry, one of the issues we have is the low availability of resources. And I don't mean computers, right? That's what this is managers talk. Resources, they usually mean people. So if a manager comes up to you and says, oh, we have a lack of resources, you say, no, you mean a lack of people. Or do you mean computers or tables or chairs or coffee cups or whatever, right? Make a difference, please. And there's low availability. This is nice. See, we're actually in a zeer krap arbeidsmarkt. This is a research being done by the UWV, the Dutch Social Security Agency. They've done this recently. Apparently, we're in trouble. Now, one of the issues we have is that we continuously look for roles, right? Recruiters hire you for roles. Companies hire you for being a particular role. The truth is, I couldn't care less. I don't care about roles. I don't care whether you're a tester, or an architect, or a developer, or an embedded developer, or a web developer, or an analyst. I talked to a guy who said recently, about 2 weeks ago, he said, yes, I don't want to be a programmer anymore, I want to be an architect. I said, so what do you want to do? He said, well, I want to write less code and draw more diagrams. That's his goal in life, right? I'm saying, well, great, right? Couldn't you do that as a developer? No, because I'm a developer. Well, that needs to stop, right? The thing is, we are all T-shaped, or whatever shape you'd call it these days, pie-shaped or whatever, but the thing is, we have some sweet spots. Maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3, right? Mine is doing horrible talks at conferences, probably. And I can write some decent code as well, but so most of us have a sweet spot, or maybe 2 sweet spots. But the thing is, there's lots of stuff you know about lots of other topics as well, which you could apply. If you know just enough about web development, and there's somebody else on your team who also knows just enough about web development, the 2 of you can actually help out each other, learn from each other, even if you're not a web developer. Let's say you are a DevOps guy and you know a little bit about web development too, and you want to learn more. If you can be in a team that actually supports that, it would help. It would broaden you, actually. HR departments usually don't know how to deal with this, by the way, because they say, well, you can be a junior developer, a senior developer, or a meteor developer, or whatever, and then you become an architect and you can stop coding, and then you can become a project manager. I don't know if that's up, basically, but anyway, so it's all cyclic, right? So basically, the thing is, if you can work together with other skill sets, you can grow in broader, right? Next problem is communication. In IT, in software development, communication is always an issue. People don't like to communicate, right? They don't actually. It's not, you will say, no, that's not true, right? But none of you says anything, so that says enough. But the thing is, if you're in agile projects or in agile teams, you have to communicate all of the day, right? I know lots of people who really hate it to be in a stand-up meeting. I hate it too. I've been in stand-up meetings for about 20 years. I hate them. And it's not that I think they're not useful. They're very useful. But I've been in so many that I just started to dislike them. And you see all these other meetings that we can have in agile projects. It's too much. Most companies I work for, people can be in meetings the whole day without writing any code, doing any design, drawing any diagrams whatsoever. It's waste. Try to get rid of as much of these meetings as you can, right? And communication can be, can be much easier. The thing is, if you have to communicate with less people, communication becomes more efficient. And also, the thresholds of communicating become much lower. If you only have to communicate with the guy sitting opposite to you or the girl sitting opposite to you, it's a lot easier than having to communicate with 10 people. It also saves a whole bunch of time. And the thing is, we don't need even more collaboration. We collaborate more than enough in this field. We need better communication. That doesn't mean Jira, by the way. Probably the opposite, but that's it, right? So all of these companies that do a day-long refinement session at the start of a sprint with the whole team, this is pure waste. Because you're usually discussing items that you're not going to do anyway in the sprint because you don't get to it, that you're not involved in because if the team has 12 people, none of these items might actually apply to what you're doing. So what are you doing there, right? Trying to stay away from meetings is my goal in life, basically. Well, anyway. So, and then the next thing is, you all know this, right? We suck terrible at estimation. It's just horrible. And it didn't get any better over the years, by the way. One of the best estimates I ever made for a project was a long time ago. A manager came up to me and said, we need an estimate for this project. Bang! He gave me a whole bunch of documentation. I'm like, okay, when do you need it? He said, this afternoon, like in 2 hours' time. I'm like, I don't know how to do this. So what I did is, there was a data model in the documentation. I counted the number of tables. I multiplied that by the number of pages in the document. And I said to him, it's 1,200 hours. And he said, okay. Just terrible. The whole thing is, estimation, specifically low-level estimates, like the stuff you do, like estimate how much work does fit in a sprint, stop doing that. First of all, you don't need to do sprints, but second of all, those low-level estimates, they do not add value at all. And it's because of this. This is the law of large numbers. I'll read it to you. It's a theorem that describes the result of performing the same experiment a large number of times. According to the law, the average of the results obtained from a large number of trials should be close to the expected value. Now, let me explain to you what that means. If you're estimating on a scale from 1 to 5, and then you might think, oh, we're using the Fibonacci numbers, so it doesn't apply to us. Yes, it still applies to you as well. By the way, whoever invented to use the Fibonacci numbers, what's the... Anyway, so if you estimate on a linear scale, say from 1 to 5, and you estimate 100 items, what do you think the average result will be?
1.
No, 1 to 5 means the average results for 100 items means 3. But if it's 3, and it will be, the larger your population will become, the closer you will get to that average. That means you don't have to do this estimate at all. You could just count the items you have. It delivers you the same value, actually. Then it's 1, right? And so you might as well stop doing this. So all of these nice, fancy, time-consuming techniques, you can just stop doing that, right? It doesn't add value. It's waste. So the next problem were those red sprints. So I talked about that before, right? And the whole thing is, if you do feature by feature, item by item, and you deliver them one by one, you pick up the next one, and you continuously do that, there is no need to have sprints. So again, I'm not saying you cannot have sprints. I'm saying you need to, look at the traffic example from Indonesia, you need to continually think what works best for you and your team and your organization. But you can move beyond this thing, right? You don't have to have sprints. In fact, they don't add enough value, I think. So the next issue is, and we're almost there, and I'll give you a sort of pattern that you can grow into, is that software development got too complex. I already told you that by discussing the programmer's mind. But if you look at the number of skills it requires to actually build software, it's growing and growing and growing. And in most companies, the technology stack will grow over time, right? Because we continuously move to new technologies, and we forget to disband the old ones. So the whole stack grows and grows and grows and grows, and we need more skills every day. That makes it more complex every day. But if you look at it from a micro perspective, you can say that every work item you work on requires a different skill set. Whether you are setting up a new pipeline, whether you're building an actual new web page, or a new form on a mobile app, or you're building a backend service, a microservice, or you're writing a Lambda, or you're doing whatever configuration, looking at monitoring, whatever you do, setting up Elastic, I don't know what. They all require different skill sets. So if you could say that if you would have a team that has all the skills required to build the product you're building, to add value continuously to the product you're building, that would actually make sense, right? Because you need these different skill sets anyway for all sorts of different work items, right? And then in the end, you might conclude that the agile framework you're using does not really help you further with these problems. Because neither the Agile Manifesto nor the traditional agile frameworks actually solve these problems. Because they were written like 20 years ago. Yes, they were updated as well, but they were written a long time ago. So if you are doing a particular agile framework, what I think you should do, it doesn't mean quit using it, but it means continuously debate within your team and in your organization whether this is still the most useful framework, and whether there's elements in there that you might replace by different stuff. Like, okay, I'm not going to do refinements with the whole team. I'm going to do design sessions whenever I start on a new work item, just with the 2-3 people that actually work on that. Makes sense, right? You can change stuff over time from the method you're working in, right? And the whole question about, oh, does Agile scale? Oh, no, it doesn't scale. Oh, yes, it scales. You can read, the rest of the weekend you can spend on reading posts on LinkedIn about whether Agile scales or not, and all the comments on it. I don't really care, actually. And whether it's a large-scale Scrum or whether it's this horrible beast, who of you is in a safe agile transformation? Oh, get out. It's the change job, please. No. The thing is, frameworks like these make the world more complex. They don't make it easier, right? I've seen companies that do agile transformations and want to move to safe, pay loads of money to very expensive consultancies in suits. And the only thing people are doing inside of the company is wondering what their role will be called once they move to safe. Will I be a, or whatever is in there, right? A solution architect / engineer, or will I be this, or will I be that, without wondering where are we going? Is this adding value? Are we moving faster? Are we building stuff feature by feature? Yes, on a release train. Release trains have tracks, right? They go on. You can always predict where a train is going because there's only one way it can go. The world isn't like this, right? So please stop doing this. And of course, the rest of you is all implementing Spotify, right? The Spotify model is a very, very nice model. I like it a lot, actually. But also the Spotify model, if you're implementing it now, that means you're implementing one company's ideas that were written down in 2014. It's a snapshot of how they thought about it 5 years ago. So first of all, basically, unless you are Spotify, a company that has double-digit growth every year in the number of people that needed to take rigorous measurements to be able to deal with that, and you're not in a company like that. So that means if you are implementing this, first of all, it's a 5-year-old model that they changed over time because they got new insights too, right? They continuously kept thinking. And you should do that too. It's not a bad idea to implement techniques from the waterfall model because there's lots of great stuff in it, as is in Scrum, as is in Less, as is in lots of these agile approaches, specifically extreme programming. But always keep thinking about what you do. Find your own way, find your own path in this, right? That's where you need to go. And first of all, stop doing these stupid projects. So here's what I think you could do. What I think you should do is, where lots of companies are still optimizing for effectiveness and efficiency, very traditional values from, let's say, the Industrial Revolution that took place like 400 years ago. My youngest son is studying about it now, so I learned a lot about the Industrial Revolution over the past couple of weeks. We need to optimize to be able to compete with all the other companies that might move into our industry. Why we need faster, right? We need to go faster. We need to optimize for speed and agility and adaptability. And the agile frameworks at hand, yeah, they do that for a bit, but not all of it. So you need to do some additional stuff. Now, remember, given the Cynefin framework, you're about here, right? This is where we are. We're in complex zones. That means you have to find the dot at the horizon. Have you ever seen The Golden Circle by Simon Sinek? Or read the book, what's called Start With Why, I think? Basically, I don't like to start with why. I like to start with who. So who are we doing this for? Who are our customers? And then figure out why you're going there, right? But in any sense, whether you call it a mission, a purpose, or the why of your organization, you need to set the dot at the horizon. And you need to start focusing on that. You need to figure out all the stuff that doesn't actually help you get to the goal to stop doing that. Because it's waste. And you need to move a lot faster, right? Yeah, that's yours. So, for instance, what you could do, what I have done at a number of companies I've worked with over the past 5 years. So I'm usually hired by companies to help them change in the technology and the culture that they have. And there's a pattern that I see a lot, and that's this, right? All of you have like a bunch of products, and you want to add features to it continuously. So what you could do is split up these products into different, well, you might call it differently. My current client, QB, they call it value streams. My previous client called it product lines. So I've seen all sorts of words for this. You can use patterns like the bounded context from domain-driven design to split up everything you do into different parts. And the thing is, you need to be able to do that, and they need to be able to move independently from each other. Because if you do that, the actual chance, if there's no dependencies between them, or few dependencies between them, is that you can actually add value continuously to each of these products, right? So, and the next step is that probably a lot of feature requests come in. I did this morning, so I'm not really sure where it ends. Probably after this one. So, new ideas come in from everywhere, from your clients, from your developers, from your DevOps people, from the product owners, wherever, right? All of this stuff comes in. It's large, it's big, it's very granular. There could be tiny improvements, et cetera, et cetera. And you need to figure out what to do with that. So in a lot of companies I work with, we sort of set up like, I these days call it an innovation board. You could do it, I've seen it in the words product board, portfolio board, product strategy group, whatever you have, a guild, so whatever you might have. And the thing they could do is say, okay, they don't have to decide the strategy. They just have to decide on whether the things you could do to improve actually meet the strategy. So you should ask questions like, the things that come in to their list, just put it in a bucket, right? In an S3 bucket or whatever, are these items that you're actually proposing, are they actually help us to reach our goals? If not, don't spend any time on it, just throw it away. Because it's out of focus. And then you need to figure out, well, can we actually do something with this? Is it actionable? If it's not, throw it away. And the next question I always ask is it too big? Because if there's all these huge ideas, usually coming from salespeople, like, yeah, we need to go into and do bloop. And then people say, what? And then you can go back, you throw it back, and you say, split it up into smaller, actionable items, right? That's the process you do. It's similar to the getting things done mechanism, if you know that. And then the question is, do we need it now? Is this the most urgent thing we could do? Does it add the most value to one of our products? If it does, just slip it into the backlog for one of these value streams, product lines, whatever you call it. If it's not, similar to getting things done, put it on the someday maybe list. which is basically the list of things you look at again later and see if then they add value. If they don't, throw them away anyway. And the next thing is, how do you organize to do this? If, again, there's groups that have, if you need a whole abundance of skills to be able to build products, like if you need 30 different skills to build a particular product, you need to have a group of people that actually can do it. Like a big band, right? This is the new cool collective, so I started calling these collectives. They all play their own instrument. They play maybe lots of other instruments. But forming small groups from this, like a piano player and a bass player and a singer, they could do a ballad, right? Or like the horn section and you have a drum kit and a bass player, you could do soul. Or you could do jazz or whatever you could do, right? So it changes from different setups of small groups from within the collective. And that's how you could organize, right? If you would say, and I created this slide again this morning too, so I'm not sure what's on it. Oh no, this is the old one, right? So in traditional software development, we have different disciplines, usually in different floors in the building. Like the enterprise architects, they're usually on the 14th floor. And then the developers on the first floor, and the testers on the ground. And then usually the DevOps people are in the basement. I don't know what it is. It's the way I've seen it, right? And then Agile changed it, right? We went into multidisciplinary teams. But I think we should go even further than that. Because software development became more complex, we could say, if there is this domain that we are working in, this area, as I call it in my new book, that hopefully comes out before summer, we need to have a whole bunch of skills that together add value to that particular independent value stream or product line or whatever you call it. And from there, you can organize it in what I started calling micro teams, because I used to do microservices, I still do. So the teams became micro teams as well. So what's the idea about this micro team? It's a recipe, basically. Every day in the stand-up, if you look at the backlog for your area, for your value stream, some items come up. If I'm done with my item currently, I could say, okay, I'm going to pick up that one, because that seems to be the most urgent, and I can use my skills to work on that. And somebody else might say, oh, you know what? I'm done with my work on that particular item. I'll help you out. And they'll form a team of 1, 2, 3 people, maybe 4 sometimes. But what I've seen is that it's usually 2 people or sometimes 3. And you can work on the item. And when it's done, when it's in production, because you have everything in a continuous flow, right? You can start again, right? And you can say, okay, I'm going to move to the next item. Maybe somebody else jumps in. It's a bit like this, right? I created a picture for that. So there's a work item. Somebody says, I'll pick it up. And somebody else says, I'll join you. And then when they're done, they move on to the next one. Next item comes up. Oh, you know what? I'll pick it up. And somebody else comes in to join me. And you get different setups per work item all the time. And it's a technique, coincidentally, that I've seen in groups of people, and it works actually. And you don't need to organize it. It organizes itself, right? It gives people full autonomy. And they're really small groups, like this one. This is a tester with 2 developers. Of course, the tester has to stand up. This is, what's this? This is an architect and a developer. You can see it's an architect because he's praying for it to work. And then also all sorts of benefits, right? You can say, well, the leadership, it depends on which item you're working on. You're in charge of that. It's your responsibility. And you only need to communicate with like 1, 2, 3 people. And you can say, you know what, the 3 of us will come in at 11 because I don't want to get stuck in traffic. Or we could say, you know what, we're going to work in a bar or at home or whatever you might do, right? Because you're just a small group. And this is a pattern that is really nice, right? So the thing is, again, sorry, Jeroen, I don't get to go to the microservice stuff because I don't have the time for that. I have some time for some retrospective, which I will move to. If I'm at, I end up at the right slide, right? So some final thoughts, because on my counter I have like 1:50 or something. Is that okay? So first of all, you have to realize that you're not in the complicated or the obvious zone, right? That means the world changes underneath you. It changes all the time. And the only thing you can do to keep up, because you need to keep up, because if you don't, some other company will. It will take your place. It will disrupt your market or your business model. It will be able to do it faster and cheaper or change the whole perspective, like Uber did, for instance. And you need to take that into account. That means everything we learned on traditional software development, even the traditional agile approaches, you should always keep on thinking about how we can improve on that. The current society requires us to even change those approaches, right? And if you're thinking, well, yeah, but it's the whole company, I cannot change that. I don't have enough influence to change this culture or the way we work or the technology we use. And I say, yes, you have. Because it always starts with somebody who starts to do things differently. By the way, I actually tried this out. So we were actually meeting for my son's football team on a parking lot in the Meren here close by. And I parked my car the wrong way. And I was first. It never happens, by the way, but I was first. And I thought, oh, let's try this out. And everybody starts parking the way I was parked. Totally opposite to how the lines were drawn. We're not used to that in the Netherlands, right? If people park outside of the lines, it gives us an uncomfortable feeling. Because we're used to having so much regulations in this stupid country that we stop thinking. And that's the main message is you always need to continue thinking about how to do things better. Even if you are as agile as you can, even if you are in a continuous flow. Because you can never stop learning. Because once you stop learning, you'll be overhauled by somebody else. And to me, the basic fun, and that comes back to the question you asked me, so what's about being independent? It's about getting the most out of your life. Whatever that may be, right? So that means probably for today, enjoy the rest of the sessions, enjoy the rest of the conference. By the way, stop doing these stupid projects. Thank you all for indulging me for about an hour. I hope you have a very pleasant day today, and I hope you learn a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Sander, for the opening.
You're welcome.
Cool. We got time for one question.
Oh.
Is there somebody a question for Sander?
I think he was first.
Over there. The three of you. You can discuss about what question. Okay, it's you.
Yeah.
What about dependencies? When you have dependencies in between tasks and we have to wait for the other guys to be finished
sorry,
first.
dependencies between what?
Tasks, items that you're supposed to be working on, but you actually depend on many other people.
What do you think you should do?
Well,
that's the agile coach's answer, right? Well, what do you think yourself? Right?
Take it to the team.
not all tasks are alike,
And the second answer, it depends, right? It depends. It could be that if you're really, really dependent on something else, do that first, right? The thing is, I cannot solve this pattern in general because it's different in any specific situation. So you need to think about how to solve things. That's the only thing I can say about it. And dependencies will always be there. But if you start working on products individually and you make them as independent as possible, probably by applying bounded context and stuff like that, ubiquitous languages and all these patterns from DDD, it helps you to get more independent of other things in your landscape.
So aren't you afraid that the innovation board will undermine the self-autonomousness of the team? It sounds like change control.
No, it doesn't do much actually. So we had this at a bunch of companies where we got together once a week. So the team, the product board consisted of people who are responsible for strategy and product in the company. And everybody could put stuff in their bucket. And what we did is, we organized in a way that everybody could come up and defend or explain their own ideas. And then discuss them with the board. And it was an open meeting, right? And then from there, the only thing we did is, if it's too big, throw it back so they have to work on it. Or if it doesn't add value. So the only real decision they made is whether it adds value now, maybe later, or not at all. That was basically all they did.
Okay.
So it's a very lean and mean pattern, I would say.
Cool. Thanks. Thank you very much, Sander. Are you joining us the whole day here? For more questions? Are you here?
Yeah, I'm going to be here all day.
Ah, perfect. Well, right now we're going to split up, guys. I'm sorry. We got